Hello, my friends. My name is Gerdes, and I'm just a professor providing context in the war in Ukraine. If you're looking for Ukraine war news, I do this every morning. I do three big stories in the evening. Please consider subscribing. 1,200 Russians off the battlefield, 3 tanks, 23 armored combat vehicles, 23 artillery systems, 57 vehicles and fuel tanks. So this number tells me the pressure is still going, and most of the pressure is around Pokrovsk. Um, Andrew Perpetua's list has been about 1 to 1 for the last week or so. That's not good. You really need it to be 2 to 1. 3 to 1 is even better. If you can get a 3 to 1 ratio, it's a good day for Ukraine. Overnight, Russia launched 18 Shahed drones. In total, 12 were shot down, 4 fell independently, likely due to electronic warfare measures. I'm a little uncomfortable when I only see less than 20 Shaheds. It sounds weird, but if I see like 25, 30, maybe a little bit more than that, 40, something like that, I feel more comfortable because when they get down to lower numbers, it means Russia's starting to save it up for an event like what happened on Monday, where they had this massive 100 Shaheeds and almost 100 missiles and that kind of thing. So that becomes problematic to my mind. Overnight Russian airstrike on Sumy resulted in 11 civilian victims. A few were discovered underneath the rubble. Another 8 were injured. And yeah, this is just bad. Now, this was in Sumy, and the reason that I'm highlighting it is because it's been rare over the last 3 or 4 weeks that there were these kind of strikes in Sumy because of the Kursk invasion. The Kursk invasion really lowered the temperature in Sumy. Kremlin propaganda is conducting an information blackout on the destruction of the Atlas military fuel depot in Rostov, which is about to enter its third day on fire after strikes by Ukrainian drones. And then yesterday, I was talking about how the Russians are not going to talk about their oil production targets anymore because that's now going to be a state secret, and it's largely a function of maybe not being able to reach those or what's happening here with the attacks on the oil depots. Okay. Russia is trying to encircle Ukrainian positions in Pokrovsk direction. That nothing's new about that, but Russian forces are executing a two-pronged tactical effort to create favorable conditions for an assault on Pokrovsk. So they're putting pressure in certain areas of the salient, trying to get themselves ready to be able to attack Pokrovsk. And this is Pokrovsk here, and they just keep moving. Gordivka, Greg Terry was talking about how he actually physically from Pokrovsk could see Gordivka on fire yesterday. I talked to Greg here. If you want to know like firsthand accounts of what's going on here, he's actually physically in Ukraine right now. And he was in Pokrovsk, and this sign, the sign on the billboard says evacuate. He has never seen a sign anywhere in Ukraine before. He's been in the country for 20 some odd years, and he's been there back and forth throughout the war. Never seen a sign that said evacuate on a billboard before. It's very bad around Pokrovsk. Okay, videos show the strike on Russian Kaluga overnight. You can see that little smoke in the distance here. So here is the border of Ukraine. Kaluga's up here on the other side of here's Kursk, and here's Bryansk and Kaluga. All right, Slovakia and Hungary. Let's turn our attention to some other news. Slovakia and Hungary return or refuse to endorse Ukraine strikes on the Russian Federation with Western weapons. Now, they've never really been supportive. Well, let me correct myself. Slovakia was and then became non-supportive, and Hungary never was supportive of Ukraine to begin with. Quote, we don't want more weapons in Ukraine. We don't want more deaths. We don't want an escalation of war. Today, we continue to advocate for common sense and peace. It's like saying to, the robber and the person who's being robbed, look, 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 we just got to stop the fighting. Okay, so they're kind of on Russia's side anyway, but they're also a little miffed now because the Russian or the oil that would flow through Ukraine from Russia into Slovakia and Hungary is being cut off officially on January 1st, 2025 through this pipeline. And so now they have to figure out an alternative way of getting that cheap oil. And it's not going to be as cheap, and they know it, and they're pretty miffed about that. Okay, Kursk in border operations day 25. There's less fighting reported from both sides. This is The ISW is reporting this, as are other places. That doesn't mean nothing's happening, but Ukraine is also digging in and preparing for a longer stay. Now, for a long time, we didn't know what Ukraine was planning to do, whether they were just going to, we thought it wasn't just a raid at first, and then we realized, no, this is more than the raid. And are they going to go to Moscow? Or no, they're not going to Moscow. They're blowing the bridges, so they're planning to stick around and try to hold this kind of territory. With Ukraine now advancing in Russia's Kursk Oblast, the Kremlin faces a difficult choice: abandon positions in Ukraine or deploy young conscripts against Putin's earlier promises not to do this. And putting conscripts who don't want to be there and have to be there raises the hackles of moms who, well, like, my son has to serve, but I don't want him to die. And I get that. That's different than volunteers who sign a contract and go voluntarily. And so this puts him in a kind of a difficult position. And conscripts are both bad fighters. They're paid less. By the way, I mean, like, so I showed you this video 2 days ago, I think it was, with the guy. He's being redeployed from the special military operation where he's making 200,000 rubles. And he's going to be making 3,200 rubles, or no, 32,000 rubles in Kursk when he's redeployed back onto Russian territory, because it's not the special military operation. And so he's getting an 83% pay cut for probably dying, but just because he's dying in Russian territory. So Russia has this terrible choice of using conscripts, and then they pay them less. That's a system. Or, and now they're pulling mercenaries out of Burkina Faso. Now, Burkina Faso is where those Wagnerites were killed by the locals who were opposing the governments in Mali. I think so. It was somewhere near here. I'm not exactly sure where it was, but Burkina Faso is where we have some Russian mercenaries. Okay, but they're also adding this. On 24 August 2024, the Russian Kursk Oblast administration announced the creation of the BARS Kursk Volunteer Unit. Prospective recruits are promised that they will serve only within the Kursk Oblast in Russia on a 6-month contract. Means Combat Army Reserve of the country. Units were first established in 2021, initially intended to provide the Russian Ministry of Defense with a cadre of active reservists with a high level of readiness and training. Since March 2022, volunteers have been able to join BARS units for short-term service. BARS units are predominantly light infantry formations which lack integrated artillery or armored vehicles. There are now over 30 BARS units across Russia. That's not going to go well for the BARS units fighting there. That's just, it's all bad for them. Okay, now here's a Russian propagandist talking about this guy here. If you put boots on Russian soldiers and give them a gun, they are already obligated to shoot and, first of all, to die. They're obligated to die? Like, what kind of perspective is this? Don't you want your soldiers not to die? Why they surrendered in groups, not laying down their lives like peers at Kursk Bulge. The Russian propagandists criticized Russian servicemen for surrendering en masse in Kursk. Better for them to have died. I'm not sure that that's a wise way of conducting a war. Okay. Meanwhile, Anton Gurushenko is talking about how Russian media are spreading panic that armed forces of Ukraine allegedly want to strike Moscow, Sochi, and Russian cities where factories are located with Storm Shadow missiles. In the third year of Russia's 3-day war, Russia is afraid of Ukrainian strikes on Moscow. All is going according to plan. Allegedly, the list of targets includes the fleet, Putin's residence, air defense systems in Sevastopol, defense and gunpowder factories, headquarters from southern Russia to Moscow, and Moscow and St. Petersburg proper. So that's what they're worried about and worrying the population about. Meanwhile, the Lithuanian Foreign Minister Landsbergis, he's awesome. He's I believe, the grandson of the former Prime Minister Landsbergis. And he's totally right when he's talking about this, and he's talking about, like, the West is supporting Russia more than they're supporting Ukraine in the way that they're. Well, I'll just let him talk.
Even though it sounds like a joke, but we're protecting Russian skies more. You know, Russian planes are better protected by the Western guarantees than Ukrainians.
Mm-hmm.
We have to ask ourselves a question: aren't we ourselves a part of this problem? So far, No Patriot batteries that have been promised to Ukraine in Washington have been delivered. No new ammunition packages have been delivered since June. The eastern flank is worried because we all understand if Ukrainians are not getting the assistance that they have been promised, that is a door open for Putin to continue.
Yep.
This is very unfortunate, but we need to start asking very specific questions when the promises are being made. Because it turns out that when a country X promises an equipment Y, it appears that the equipment Y is unsuitable, is unusable, it needs repairs, it would take a very long time for it to be delivered. And as for example, during our discussions with Ukrainian friends, we find out that certain equipment that has been promised last year will only be delivered in 2027, even though the calculations and the promises and the announcements and the headlines have been in 2023. And as you know, Putin has reliable friends. North Koreans, Iranians are able to resupply Russia with what they promised. So there's this difference. In some cases, we are creating a narrative, a good story to tell our citizens, that we are fighters for what's good. But when it comes to deliveries, well, the story sometimes is very different. But there's another message, that basically Europe is prepared to lose. And I really hope that those people who make decisions not to provide Ukraine what is promised, they are preparing for the next stage of war. Because that will come.
Yeah, so that's the reality. If you keep slow walking this stuff, this kind of thing keeps happening. Okay. And I just can't understand for the life of me why we say one thing and then we don't actually deliver on these promises. We need to get them what they need as quickly as possible. Okay, my friends, that's all that I have today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.